Next, we're going to take a look at how we can transform a simple percussion loop into something with a lot more texture, movement, and distortion to it. So before, our simple percussion loop is going to sound like this. And after, it's going to sound like this. So we're going to achieve this effect by combining the roar distortion unit with a delay, and that's what's going to give us some of that width, but then we'll get this interesting moving distortion texture as well. And I'll also be showing you how to add some crunch and movement with the feedback circuit inside this distortion. So let's go ahead and copy over our loop. So I'll go ahead and select that and hold Option or Alt and drag it over. Now let's go ahead and just assign the track color to the clips. And then we will grab our roar distortion unit and then the simple stock Ableton delay. And then we'll go ahead and just turn the feedback all the way up. We'll adjust this once we're finished here. We'll kind of play around with some of these EQ values. The other thing that we do want is the ping pong modes. That way it's bouncing from left to right. And then we could go ahead and change this over to 1. So that way we get a nice bounce to it. Let's also take that feedback all the way down to 2. So that way we don't have a really long feedback. Then let's go ahead and group this so it can run in parallel. So I'll hit Command and G. That'll group it. And then we're going to go ahead and right click in this section here, hit Create Chain. Then I'll hit Command or Control and R and name this dry. Put that up at the top. Then we can go ahead and turn that down a little bit. There we go. And then we'll go ahead and solo that out. So that way we can start working on our patch. So there's a bunch of different options for how we can go about distorting our different patches here. For this, again, we'll use that multiband as our main shaper. Definitely one of my favorite modes on this. But we'll be switching it up. We won't just be using the soft sine curves like we've been using in the previous videos. We'll be using those in a combination with some of the digital distortion modes to add a little bit more texture to everything, especially in that mid-range. So let's go ahead and hop over to the multiband mode. And again, this is really just going to give us a lot of control over how we shape our whole percussion loop and this delay unit, because now we can create our own custom delay sounds based on how we distort and process everything before it hits our delay effect. Let's turn off those mids and highs. Then we'll go ahead and crank that up and then also push our output. Then also push that input drive as well. We'll do like 4.2. So we're starting to get just a little bit of crunch on this. There's not a lot of lows in this sound, but let's go make sure there's no like sub bass hanging out in this. So we'll swap this over to high pass filter and kind of just take out any of that really low rumble stuff that's below like 650 or so. And by the way, we're just leaving that on the soft sine shaper, which should be the default. But this next one, we're going to go ahead and swap over to the digital distortion. So let's go to digital clip. And I'll turn this one off over here. And then we'll go ahead and just crank this all the way up. So we get a lot of really nice crunch on the top end. So you can hear this one is a little bit different than the soft sine. It's not pushing those mids as hard, so we're not getting a mid-range crunch. It's more of a high-frequency crunch. And it's kind of pulling up all that interesting ambience and movement inside this percussion loop too. Let's go over to the biasing and adjust it. So that's going to adjust our distortions curve. And you can almost get these kind of weird like glitchy effects by reducing this. And we're going to adjust this until we get kind of a nice rhythmic sound here. Where we start to lose a little bit of detail in the sound, but we start to kind of get this nice clicky texture. There we go. Then we can filter out some of those highs so that way it's not too bright. Does more of like a mid-range effect. So we'll do that at 1,790. Could also turn that down just a little bit. So we'll take that down 2 decibels. So that'll just give us a little bit of control over how loud that section of mids is. One of the nice parts about this multiband mode is the ability to individually adjust the volumes of everything after you've distorted them, which is really nice because I can essentially use this as like an EQ unit as well. And then for these high frequencies, I don't want to distort them too much because we're already getting a lot of crunch on those mids. You can hear those are pretty pushed, and I don't want to just wash out all my high frequencies. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave it on the soft side, and we'll go ahead and just distort it, just to kind of help push out those mids. Especially on the high frequencies, they're already a little bit on the harsh side, so I don't want to push them too hard. So we'll use this to push those upper mids. You can also filter out some of those frequencies. So we could do that at like 1000 or so. So that'd be 1090. And now we're getting this really interesting lo-fi percussion sound. And then we're really letting all those high frequencies come through in the original sample. And then the delay is sort of sitting out of the sides because of this ping pong delay. And it's sort of allowing it to bounce around the stereo spectrum, but without the high frequencies being really harsh in your face. All the nice high frequencies are unprocessed and in the center from our main dry channel. Now let's go ahead and start adding in some movement to this patch to make it a little bit more dynamic. We will also use this as well to add in some interesting feedback, which is where that kind of weird, almost digital distortion came from in the introduction that you heard of the percussion loop. So what we'll do is take this first filter frequency, this high channel, and we'll have this move just a little bit. Let's have our rate be just a little bit slower. So we'll do 1/2, so it takes half a bar for this to fully finish its modulation. So that way it's nice and slow. It kind of adds this rhythmic movement, but it's not super fast. Go over to the matrix, click on the filter frequency for the highs. So go over to highs, filter frequency, LFO number 1, then go ahead and increase this. Could probably also drop that down just a little bit now, so maybe about halfway. And now it gives us a much more interesting sound because the high frequencies are evolving as my sound plays back. So it's actually adding in kind of a cool groove because of that delay and also the movement. So I've put the final values here at 567 and 56 on the amount for that filter frequency. Next thing that we will do is go over to our feedback circuit over here. Now we'll increase this just a little bit so we get some feedback happening on our distortion. So it kind of gives us like a weird digital sound. So I don't want quite that much of it on the main sound here, so I'm going to reduce this. And then what we're going to do is have this LFO control this amount. So it's basically going to be turning this up and down in value. So maybe bump that up just a little bit more. And see how it adds kind of that weird texture to everything? There's this kind of flange texture that comes in halfway through once that LFO opens up, and it gives you a much more interesting delay sound. So on its own. So it gives you this kind of cool robotic sound for that delay. Then let's compress this so that way we're pulling that distortion all together. So I'd like that at an amount of 60, so we have quite a bit of compression happening on our signal. Maybe push that a little more. 65 sounds nice. And then that's going to be all for this distortion unit. The last thing that we'll do is go over to our delay, make sure the dry wet's turned all the way up, make sure it is turned to ping pong mode so that way we get that stereo width. You won't get the stereo width if you don't have that turned on, which could be a cool sound too, but I like that width. Kind of adds a nice dynamic pumping sound to the overall sound. And then we can go ahead and play around with this EQ value here. So that way we can cut out some of those lows and then just a little bit of those highs so there's nothing sort of ultra harsh hanging out the upper high frequencies. Okay, so now let's play that in context with our main loop. That sounds nice with the filter values. The width is at 4.53. So that's just cutting out a little bit of highs and then mainly cutting out some of those low end frequencies that we don't need. Feel free from here to adjust the various different components on this distortion unit. You can create all sorts of interesting textures just by changing out the different types of distortion. So for example, if we change this over to a different curve here, maybe like a diode clipper, we can get some different textures on this that we wouldn't get with our main sound. So there's a lot of different options